Salvete omnes. We continue our read along in the Nāvigātiō with chapter 21, Bēstiae sub Māre, beasts under the sea. Quorum vero tempore, so during a certain time, ablative there, cum sanctus Brendanus celebrasit sancti Petri apostoli festivitatem, when St. Brendan celebrated the festival of St. Peter the Apostle. Footnote here, the feast of St. Peter and St. Paul is June 29th. Invenerunt in sua nave, in his boat, invenerunt mare clarum, they found a clear sea, ita ut possent videre quidquid subtus erat, so that they were able to see whatever was beneath. Cum autem aspexisint intus in profundum, so when they looked into the deep, or into the depths, viderunt diversa genera bestiarum, they saw diverse types of beasts, iacente super arenam, lying on the sand. Videbater quoque iris, quod potuissent manu tangere illas. So it appeared also to them that they could touch them by hand, prae nimia claritate irius maris, because of the exceeding clarity of the sea. Now, I interpret this as meaning it just seems like a very clear picture, like they could reach out and touch them. I don't think the beasts are actually so close to their boat that they can just like reach in and touch them. Erant inem sicut greges iacantes in pascuis, for they were like flocks lying in pasture, prae multitudine, because of their multitudes. Tales videbantur, sicut iunctus in girum, applicantes capita ad posteriora iacinto. And they were appearing, I put a footnote here, for they were such as ones appeared to be joined together, iunctas, in circles, applying or laying their hands to their posteriors, their heads on their tails, perhaps. This sentence seems a little unclear to me. It seems like it's getting back to that Jasconius idea who wants to, he's always trying to join his head to his tail, like an Ouroboros, the self-eating snake. I think that's what the author's getting at here. Rogabant fratres venerabilum patrum ut celebrasent cum silentio suum missem. So the brothers asked the venerable father to celebrate his mass with silence. Ne bestiae audicent ac elevasent se ad persequendos servos Christi, lest the beasts should hear and raise themselves up to persecute the servants of Christ. Sanctus Pater suberisit, aeque dicebat illis. So the Holy Father laughed and said to them, Miror valde vestram stultitiam. I marvel greatly at your foolishness. Cur timetis istas bestias? Why do you fear these beasts? Et non temuistis de omnium bestiarum maris devoratorum et magistrum? And why do you not fear the devourer and master of all the beasts of the sea? This one's a little tricky to read through because the subject comes so late in the sentence. So he's saying, why do you fear these beasts when you didn't fear the devourer and master or commander of all the beasts of the sea? Sedentes vos, atque salentes multis vicibis in dorso ius. You were sitting and singing psalms many times on his back. This refers, of course, to Jasconius, who they refer here to as the master and the devourer of all the beasts of the sea. Which is interesting, because usually that it gets applied to the idea of Leviathan, the sea beast, except in this story, Leviathan is the devil, and apparently also perhaps a giant sea creature. So maybe that's why Jasconius gets all his name, because they wanted this idea of like the alpha, the apex sea creature being a kind of morally neutral character. And of course, the spiritual lesson here is fairly plain. they see these things that they fear, so they're asking St. Brendan to celebrate church quietly so that, the demons won't hear, if you will. You can probably think of something in your own life where you felt that temptation of, well, maybe I'll just do my religious rites silently so that, no one notices and no one does anything about it. We move on. Imo et silvam scinditis, et ignum succinditis carnum coquistis. Also, you cut down wood and kindled succindistis a fire and cooked meat. This refers to the thing that they did on the back of Jasconius. Interesting note here, with Jasconius it said there were sparse trees on his back. And some commentators say, well, maybe these, trees are like, whiskers or hairs or something. But given that they cut them down and started a fire with them, it does seem that Jasconius is just that big, and perhaps that slow moving that he has literal trees growing on his back. Ergo, cur timetis istas? Therefore, why do you fear these? Nonne Deus omnium bestiarum est Dominus noster Jesus Christus. Is not the Lord Jesus Christ the God of all the beasts, qui potest humiliare omnia animantia, who can humiliate everything having a soul. Or everything living would probably be a better translation. Cum haec disixit, so having said these things, coepit cantare in quantum potuit alcius, he begins to sing as loud as he can, or as much as he can. Ceteri namque ex frateribus spiciebant semper bestias. And others of the brothers were always looking at the beasts. Again, this is very relatable. They ask him to, hey, be quiet. So he's like, you know what? I'm going to sing this mass as loud as I can. And even though they've got that bold leadership there, some of them still, they're not thinking about the mass. They're not thinking about church or the Eucharist. They're looking over the side of the boat at all the danger that's outside. Cum autem audicent, so having heard this, Bēstiae levaverunt se ad terra, et natabat in circuitu navis. The beasts raised themselves up from the land and were swimming around the ship. Ita, ut non potuissent frateres ulta videre in omnem partem, parae multitudine derversatum nantantium, so that the brothers could not see anything else in all the parts, meaning all the parts of the sea, because of the multitude of the diverse swimmers. So there's so much different sea creatures swimming around, they can't see anything else under the sea. Tamen non appropinquabant naviculae, however, they did not approach the boat, sed longe lateque natabant, but afar and wide were swimming, et ita huc atque iluc, and thus here and there, donac vir Dei finivit missum se retinebat. So until the man of God finished mass, they held themselves back. They retained themselves. Post haec, so after this, quasi fugiendo, like they were fleeing, omnes bestiae per diversas simitas oceane, a facie servorum Dei natabat. All the beasts were swimming away from the face of the servants of God through the various paths of the ocean. I do find it interesting that they talk about paths in the ocean, considering you can swim anywhere in the ocean. Sanctus Brendanus per octo dies per prospero vinto et veris extensis vix potuit mare clarum trans Māre. So St. Brendan, for 8 days, or through 8 days, with the prosperous wind and sails extended, could barely go across the clear sea. What I think they're getting at here is that they had a good wind, the sails were extended, they're going very fast, and it still took them 8 days. It took them, almost 9 days to cross the very clear sea. I think this is getting at how big this clear portion of the sea is. And that's all for that chapter. In the next chapter, they'll see a heavenly column of crystal in the middle of the ocean.